I never should have taken that old forest road at twilight, but when the whispering started, I felt compelled to follow it deeper into the Appalachian gloom. My name is Claire Hensley, a 27-year-old nature photographer, and I'd driven from Knoxville to capture the last light on Roan Mountain. As I turned off Highway 321 onto a winding gravel lane marked Old Waterfall Trail, the sky was flushed a bruised purple. My headlights carved narrow beams through hemlock and red spruce, and that's when I first heard it, a breathy susurrus that seemed to come from every tree around me. It was almost imperceptible, a rustling of leaves or perhaps distant wind, but it felt personal, as if the forest itself were addressing me. Curiosity pried me out of the car. My camera, slung over my shoulder, felt heavy with anticipation. I stepped onto the soggy ground. Pine needles sighed underfoot. The whisper grew stronger, 9 voices speaking so softly I could not parse words, yet I was sure they beckoned. Come, I see you alone. My heart thundered as I climbed a low ridge to get a better vantage of the old trail. The path forked at a broken sign. One arrow pointed to waterfall, the other to hollow. Until today, I'd assumed the hollow was a quaint name for a valley. But standing there, mist drifting like ghost smoke around my ankles, I realized it was a hollow in more ways than one, a yawning sadness. Compelled by the whispers, I turned toward that sign and walked into the thinning light. Within minutes, the canopy closed in until it was nearly dark. Moss-draped limbs brushed my camera strap. My breath puffed out white in the sudden chill, even though it was late June. Ahead, I glimpsed movement, a shadow darting between 2 pines. I raised my camera, lens clicking as I tried to focus, but the shadow had vanished. I lowered the camera. The whispering resumed, louder now, urgent. Find us, help us. Turning a bend, I found a shallow depression, a hollow littered with fallen logs and upturned roots. The earth here was spongy, as if the ground itself had inhaled centuries of decay. Underfoot, something compressed like a skull between pine needles. I knelt and brushed aside debris. A child's battered shoe, the leather cracked, laces frayed. My stomach turned. Why would a child's shoe be here in the middle of the woods? The whispering paused. Silence roared. I scanned the tree line, camera forgotten. And then I saw her, a little girl in a tattered white dress, face smeared with mud, standing beneath an ancient oak. Her hair was matted. She stared at me with eyes too large, too black for any child. My throat clenched. Hello, I croaked. Are you lost? She opened her mouth, and the whispering surged like an avalanche, filling my ears with countless voices. Please find us. Her voice was a fragile wheeze. I swallowed hard, stepping closer into the hollow. Around me, the trees bent inward as if eavesdropping. I realized the voices were not instructions but pleas, emanating from the earth itself. I could almost see faint shapes swirling beneath the moss, silhouettes of children, their faces pressed into the dark soil. My skin prickled at the sight. What happened here? I whispered, though I already sensed the answer. The girl shifted, and her dress flared like mist. She pointed to the foot of the oak. There, carved into the bark, was a faded inscription, "The Willoughby Tragedy, 1918. Beneath it, scratched so roughly it was nearly illegible, read, "They took our children, buried them here." I remembered legends of Willoughby Glen, a logging camp that had collapsed in a flash flood during the Spanish flu outbreak. Stories told of 19 children who drowned and were buried in a mass grave among those very trees. Locals said their souls wandered the hollows, whispering to the living, longing for recognition. A sudden gust rattled the branches. The girl's form flickered. Her eyes brimmed with tears of mud. "We're still here," she breathed. Hungry, cold. A wave of nausea overwhelmed me. My camera dangled useless at my hip. I wanted to run, but my legs were leaden. The earth beneath me started to throb with the pulse of 1,000 damp hearts. Young faces pressed against the moss, some gaunt, some blurred in the dim light, all pale. Their mouths opened in silent wails. I felt them reach for me, spectral fingers brushing my ankles. Panic seized me. I staggered backward, tripping over a root, crashing onto my back. The camera flew from my shoulder, lens shattering against a rock. I scrambled to my car, chest heaving, the whispering crescendoing into a deafening chorus of sorrow. "Find us! Help us! Remember us!" I fumbled for the keys, started the engine, and tore down the gravel road, headlights carving a frantic path back through the forest. Behind me, the hollow fell silent as if it had never been disturbed. Yet in my rearview mirror, I could swear I saw the little girl standing at the tree line, watching me go, her eyes hollow, her lips moving in a plea that echoed in my mind long after the road straightened and the mountains receded. I returned to Knoxville that night, unable to sleep, haunted by snapshots burned into my memory, faces pressed in soil, a dress of mud, and that broken child's shoe. I knew the only way to escape their whispers was to tell their story. So here it is, the lost children of Willoughby Glen, buried in the hollow, waiting for someone to remember them. And if you ever hear whispering in the Appalachian woods, listen closely. They may be calling for you. The first time I heard about Pine Creek Bridge, it was from old Mr. Jenkins at the country store. He paused mid-pour, filling my coffee, glancing out the grimy window toward the mountains. "You stay away from that bridge after dark, Missy," he warned, his voice low, eyes haunted. I laughed it off. I'd lived in Johnson City all my life, and I didn't scare so easy. But when I met Jacob's gaze, a wide-eyed teenager who'd lately come home with nightmares, the laughter froze in my throat. "My name is Allison Reed, local school teacher. When I turned 28, my sense of skepticism was as sharp as a mountain hawk's. On a late September evening, I decided to prove Jenkins wrong. I invited two colleagues, Jeremy and Lena, to hike out to Pine Creek Bridge just after sunset. We packed flashlights, pepper spray, and extra batteries, just in case. The road to the bridge was a narrow single lane, the pavement cracked and overtaken by weeds. As we drove, the sky graduated from lavender to a bruised navy. The car's headlights pierced the gathering darkness, revealing tangled hemlocks and ancient oaks that leaned like congregants toward the road, their branches creaking with secrets. We parked where the gravel narrowed to dirt and set off on foot. Pine Creek, usually a cheerful stream by day, was reduced to a whispering trickle under a skeletal steel bridge. The metal creaked with age. Rust clung like scabs to the girders. Under the bridge, the creek bed gaped like a canyon, its sides sheathed in slippery moss. We stepped onto the bridge, and the wooden planks groaned beneath our weight. The flashlight beams danced along the rivets. I felt the temperature drop. I wrapped my jacket tighter around my shoulders. Lena pointed, finger trembling. There, halfway across, someone or something stood shrouded in darkness. Our breath halted. "Jacob," she whispered. Jacob was the local kid who'd vanished last month. But it was not Jacob. The figure was too tall, too unnatural. Its head was tilted at a grotesque angle, like a broken doll. Its eyes, no, its eye. A single luminous orb stared at us, reflecting our lights with a jolt of ice. "Who's there?" Jeremy called out, voice cracking. The figure did not respond. Instead, it stepped forward, each movement jerky, as if its joints were rusted hinges. The beam of my flashlight caught something on its face, an area where flesh should have been, but instead was smooth wooden, like the inside of a coffin. The figure let out a sound that was part cough, part rattle, a rasp that vibrated in my chest. "Leave," it croaked, voice hollow as the creek bed. I felt his warning as a cold blade sliding across my spine. Jeremy grabbed my arm. "Allie, let's go." Now, I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted to the rotted boards. I dared to speak. What are you?" My words felt like stones in my mouth. It took another step, and I saw its legs twisted, unnatural. One leg bowed grotesquely inward, the other straight but filthy. Beneath its tattered shirt, sinewy ribs jutted through tainted leather skin. It tilted its head, and a shiver passed through me. "They left me," it rasped. I guard the crossing. Then it clicked its tongue as if tasting something rotten. "You belong to the river now." Fear finally freed my legs. I bolted, Lena and Jeremy close behind, sprinting across the rickety bridge. Behind us, we heard planks splintering. I didn't dare look back. The sound of rapid, owl-like wings brushed overhead. Branches whipped our faces as we plunged back toward the car. We tumbled in, doors slamming. The engine roared to life. Tires skidded on gravel. As we sped away, my headlights illuminated the bridge one last time. The figure stood at its midpoint, arms spread, head tilted, watching us depart. Pine Creek Bridge sagged under its weight, as if acknowledging a master. That night I couldn't sleep. The image of that ragged figure haunted my eyelids. Its voice, hollow and brittle, echoed in my dreams. "You belong to the river now." I called Mr. Jenkins the next morning. "You saw it too, huh?" he said, though his voice gave nothing away. "That bridge has been haunted since the flood of '37. A lumber baron forced a family off their land, sending them downriver on a rickety ferry. It capsized, everyone drowned, but the youngest child survived, twisted by the current, broken by the guilt of his family's death. He crawled from the water and died of exposure on the bridge, his body left to rot. Folks say his spirit haunts that spot, waiting for new souls to claim." I asked about Jacob, the missing teenager. "He went looking for a dare, didn't he? Coward's way out chasing ghost stories. They found his flashlight, but not him. Some say the river gave him up. Others say he's just another guard now." I ended the call with a shaken silence. Days later, I visited Pine Creek on a sunny morning. The creek bubbled, oblivious. People hiked by, unafraid. The bridge looked rickety, but innocuous in daylight. I brushed away the shreds of fear and leaned over the railing, scanning the mossy stones below. No sign of Jacob or the phantom. Yet as I stepped back, my foot caught on a rotting plank. It creaked dangerously. I froze, remembering its broken hinge in the messenger's gate. I straightened and walked away briskly. As the wall of trees closed behind me, I heard a metallic click, like a latch closing. Something in the air felt sealed. That night, I dreamed of a hand reaching from black water, dragging me toward a silent riverbed. When I awoke, my pillow was damp with sweat, and I realized I'd left my camera on the bridge. The last photo it took was a dim, grainy shot of a young boy's face pressed against the lens, eyes black as the deep woods, mouth twisted in an unearthly grin. They said the Weeping Falls were beautiful, cascades of water tumbling through a moss-carpeted gully hidden deep in the Smokies. Even local guides whispered about the cliffs as a pilgrimage spot. But they also whispered about the curse. Anyone who drank from the falls at midnight would hear the dead weep. My name is Marcus Bellamy, freelance journalist and amateur hiker. When I heard the story of Weeping Falls, I smelled a headline. I convinced my friend Dana, a botanical researcher, to join me as we sought rare wildflowers rumored to grow near the falls. We set out on a clear October day, boots crunching on fallen pine needles, backpacks heavy with supplies and recording gear. The trail narrowed after 2 miles, becoming a faint animal track. We ducked under twisted rhododendron and bent over ferns, stepping carefully over roots that curled like serpents. As dusk fell, we reached a fork marked only by a single cairn. According to a note scrawled in my guidebook, the falls lay to the left, a steeper descent, but more direct. We paused, scanning the thinning light. We should camp here, Dana suggested. Night falls in 20 minutes. I shook my head. No, I want to see the falls at midnight. We push on. She sighed but followed. The forest closed in. The last rays of sun flickered out. Suddenly, faint sobbing floated upstream. It was so quiet I thought it might be my imagination. Dana stiffened. Did you hear that? I turned my head. Probably a deer caught in brush. But as we descended, the sobbing repeated, soft at first, then gathering into a keening chorus of lamentation. My pulse hammered as I grabbed my flashlight. Its beam caught silver on rushing water. We reached a small clearing, and there it was, Weeping Falls, a cascade of moonlit water pouring into a shallow pool. The sobbing emanated from the mist. Dana fumbled a water bottle. I'm not drinking that, she said, voice tight. I shrugged and knelt to fill my bottle. The water was icy cold, deceptively pure. I raised it to my lips. At the precise stroke of midnight, the sobbing surged and fractured into sobs, screams, wails, an anguished chorus that rattled the trees. I froze mid-drink, feeling eyes on my back. A shape moved behind the falls, a figure draped in pale, dripping cloth, as though risen from the depths. Its face was concealed, but the sobbing emanated from it. A mother's cries, a child's scream, a soldier's moan. My mind reeled. What tragedy had drowned here? Dana shrieked. I dropped the bottle into the pool. The figure stepped forward. Water saturated its clothes, outlining a skeletal form. Its head lolled, hair plastered to a skull-shaped visage. Its lips peeled back, revealing teeth stained black. It opened its mouth, and the sobbing intensified, a parasitic chorus that sank into my bones. I stumbled backward, kicking soil into its path, but it rose, gliding over the rocks. Dana grabbed my arm. Run! We bolted up the trail, hearts hammering, lungs burning. Behind us, the sobbing chased, echoing like rolling thunder. By the time we burst into daylight, the wails stopped. We didn't stop to rest. We sprinted until the forest gave way to the dirt road where I parked the car. We collapsed onto the trunk, gasping, eyes wild. Behind us, the forest was still, silent except for the distant echo of a creek. We didn't speak for hours. In the morning, I retrieved my water bottle. Inside was a black smear, like dried blood. A crust formed at the bottom, coagulated sludge that snapped at me with a faint, sorrowful hiss as I shook it. Dana and I left the Smokies that day, haunted by every drip of water that wasn't ours. Later, I wrote a column about Weeping Falls. Readers sent letters, stories of loved ones lost in ammonia, casualties of war, victims of drowning. All said they heard cries in their dreams after reading my piece. I wondered, did I awaken something? Did my intrusion at midnight break a seal, unleashing those voices into the world? Now, every time I see a stream or hear rain on a rooftop, I half expect to hear that wailing chorus, ghosts searching for release. And if you ever find yourself by Weeping Falls at night, remember, some waters do not forgive, and the dead remember pain better than the living ever could. I was certain the mines of Coal Ridge had closed decades ago, ghosts of an industry long past. But at dusk on a late November evening, I heard a distant whistle that froze every drop of warmth in my veins. My name is Henry Lawson, history teacher and amateur paranormal investigator. I'd come to Coal Ridge, an abandoned town in the heart of the Central Appalachians, to document its shuttered buildings for a local exhibit. As I crossed the cracked pavement, my boots crunching on broken glass, I saw the old rail line, rusted tracks vanishing beneath leaf litter. The sky was overcast, low clouds rumbling like a dying beast. Locals told me nobody lived here anymore, but a few stragglers claimed they heard a train passing through at midnight, though no tracks had borne freight since 1959. I set my camera atop the station platform, aimed along the tracks, hoping to capture evidence. I checked my watch, 11:47 p.m. A bitter wind carved through my jacket. My breath steamed in front of me. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of coal dust. Then I heard it, choo-choo, a deep hollow whistle that echoed from a void. The station sign rattled overhead. I steadied the camera and switched to video. From deeper in the woods, a dim glow appeared, a phosphorescent pulse that flickered like a dying ember. My heart thudded. Was it headlights? As it grew louder, metal screeched beneath it, an impossible sound, rails grinding after years of neglect. I trained my camera on the tracks. In the faint glow, I saw the outline of a locomotive, enormous, its boiler dented, wheels caked with rust. But the engine glowed with an unearthly light, as if fueled by ghosts. Smoke, thick and acrid, billowed into the sky, though there were no flames. The whistle blew again, an anguished keening that rattled my ribcage. The wheels clattered, each beat resonating like a funeral drum. The train crawled onto the station platform, carriage after carriage churning through decayed ties. Inside, by the flickering glow of lanterns, I glimpsed passengers, skeletal figures in miners' garb, faces hollow, eyes fixed forward, expressions vacant. The whistle blew a third time, and the conductor, an emaciated man with a coal-black coat, stepped down onto the platform. His face was ashen, his eyes burned with an inner fire. He lifted his lantern and pointed at me. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, voice like coal sliding down a chute. His lantern's light flickered across a wide scar on his cheek. Shadows danced like trapped spirits across his face. I raised my camera. He snarled, "Not with that," and slammed his lantern on the ground. The flames sputtered out. Darkness crashed down. I fumbled for my flashlight. The beam shook, fell upon the train's wheels. They were moving again, ready to depart. The skeletal passengers turned their heads in unison to stare at me, mouths opening in silent screams. I dropped the camera and ran. Behind me, the whistle exploded into a final ear-splitting wail. Planks beneath my feet splintered as the train churned past, sucking air as if devouring the night. I sprinted through the abandoned town, branches whipping my face. My lungs burned, and I felt the weight of unseen hands brushing my shoulders, pulling at my clothes. I didn't stop until I reached my car, parked at the town's lone intersection. My hand shook as I inserted the key. The engine roared to life, tires screeching on asphalt. I didn't look back until the fog swallowed Coal Ridge. Then I dared glance at my camera still tucked in my backpack. When I reviewed the footage later that night, the train appeared only as a blur, smudges of coal gray light. But at 11:53 p.m., the video captured the conductor's face half shrouded in darkness, one eye gleaming like a charred ember. His eyes seemed to follow me across the screen, and I could hear his whisper through the phone speaker. "Don't tell them where I am." Since that night, I've heard rumors. Truckers claim the phantom train occasionally emerges near the highway, roaring down non-existent tracks. Hikers swear they smell coal smoke where no locomotive travels. Some say the miners who perished in the 1912 tunnel collapse still ride the rails, bound to that train, seeking passage to the afterlife. But the conductor ensures they never leave. I keep the footage locked away. I dare not show it. If word gets out, explorers will flock to Coal Ridge. I've learned some things are better left buried under the rust and rot of memory. The phantom train doesn't want an audience. It wants solitude in its endless journey through abandoned hollows. And I intend to let it ride alone. I never believed in ghosts until I took that summer job at Lockridge Sawmill. My name is Mariah Blake, 25, recent college graduate, needing cash for rent. The owners were desperate. A young man had died in a machinery accident months ago, and since then, employees reported strange noises, thumping in the walls, saw blades turning on their own, and worst of all, a shadowy figure glimpsed among the stacks of lumber at night. The job was simple: 12-hour night shifts, feeding logs into the giant bandsaw, stacking planks. The mill was nestled in a hollow near Martin's Creek, surrounded by tangled undergrowth and the dense stand of oaks and tulip trees. My first night, I arrived at 8 p.m. The sun hung low, a slate disk sinking behind a ridge. Inside, the mill was cavernous, high ceilings, rafters cluttered with cobwebs, sawdust motes drifting in a glare of dusty incandescent bulbs. I met my coworkers: Jed, a grizzled man in his 50s with a perpetual grimace; Lee, a lanky kid fresh out of high school; and Martha, a stone-faced woman who worked the control panel. They warned me to stay near the others. "Don't go into Section C after midnight," Jed rasped. "Bad things happen there." When I pressed for details, he shut up, clearing his throat. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I fed logs, monitored the blade, felt the hum of the machinery to vibrate through my bones. Around 11 p.m., Lee hollered, pointing to a dark corner where lumber was piled. I swung my flashlight beam. Nothing but stacks of oak planks. "Did you see something?" I asked. Lee scuffed his boot. "Figured I saw movement, that's all." I shrugged and returned to my station. At 1:13 a.m., the main lights flickered. I froze mid-feed. The lights went out completely. The mill plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the blinking emergency bulbs. A low moan rumbled through the sawdust-choked air. Suddenly, the bandsaw revved to life, even though no one was operating it. Sparks flared as the blade gnawed into a log. The sound was deafening. My heart hammered. I dove behind a stack of lumber as the blade ground to a halt. When the lights flickered back on, Lee and Jed sprinted into Section C. They'd seen something too. Martha yelled over her shoulder, "Don't go alone," but they vanished into the shadows. I fought the urge to follow. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the edge of Section C. The stacks of lumber formed a maze of shadows. My beam landed on a tilted table saw, its blade spinning slowly, though no one had touched it. I took a step forward and heard footsteps behind me. I whirled. No one. The beam caught a tall figure draped in an oil-stained coat, standing halfway between two stacks. Its face was obscured by darkness. My breath froze. I backed away, but the murmur of whispering filled my ears, words I couldn't understand, like metal thrown onto wet cloth. Then the figure lunged. I dropped to the floor, rolling behind a kiln of drying planks. When I peered out, the figure was gone. I sprinted to the control panel, hitting the breaker switch to shut off all machinery. The sudden silence was nauseating. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911. As I spoke, I heard Martha's voice. "Mariah? Get out." I turned. Martha stood at the far door, eyes wide, lips trembling. I bolted past her. Outside, the night air was cold and crisp. Sparks from a distant sawmill flared like embers in the dark valley. Jed and Lee stumbled out, faces ghostly in the moonlight. Neither spoke. We climbed into my car, tires squawking as I peeled away. That night, I read in the town's small newspaper that a logger named Silas Harrow died in that mill in 1952. He'd fallen into a running bandsaw, his body severed. His spirit, angry, tormented, was said to haunt the mill, seeking company in death. A photo showed him, a lean man with coal-black hair, eyes hollow. I compared it to the figure I'd seen. It matched exactly. I went back to the mill the next morning when the sun was high, determined to find evidence. An old brick wall in section C caught my eye. Scratched into the mortar were words, "Silas wants company." Beneath it, a handprint pressed into fresh sawdust. I pressed my glove to the same spot. It felt impossibly cold. I quit that job immediately. I couldn't stay around to be company for a dead man craving companionship. Every time I drive past the hollow now, I see that old mill, broken windows like dead eyes, rusted conveyor belts like entrails. Parked at the roadside, I heard the faint hum of a saw blade and saw a shadow move behind a window. I don't stop. But some nights, when the wind rattles a window pane, I swear I hear a raspy whisper, "Come, keep me company." The summer I turned 16, I worked on the Peterson Farm clearing brush along the abandoned ridge above town. The locals called it the Bone Orchard, a desolate grove of oak and sycamore where no tree stood taller than 10 feet. They said it was the site of an old burial ground destroyed by the highway expansion in the 1930s. When bodies were exhumed, the workers found skeletons arranged around a circle, like some grim totem. They hurriedly reburied the remains in unmarked graves and built a grove of seedlings above it to memorialize the lost dead. My name is Eli Peterson, grandson of the original owner. That July, I spent long days cutting brush under the hot sun, sweat stinging my eyes. The Bone Orchard lay at the far end of our property, a somber clump of trees standing on a slight rise. On my second week clearing, I noticed something. Halfway up the ridge, a single sapling was dead, its bark peeled away in places, revealing bleached wood. The surrounding trees were lush. Curiosity tugged me uphill after work. Just past the dead sapling, I found shallow depressions in the soil, 6 in total, each about the size of a dinner plate. Bones lay scattered across the surface, teeth, rib fragments, phalanges. I blinked, thinking I'd stumbled into an animal scavenger's kill site. But these were human bones. My breath caught. Raising my camera, I snapped photos, stepping carefully around the oaks. One tree's roots curled over a half-buried skull, cheek resting on the earth as if offering one last prayer. A sudden breeze rattled the leaves. I froze. From deeper in the orchard, I heard faint footsteps, like someone walking on brittle leaves. I shone my flashlight into the gloom. Beyond the sapling stood a young woman in a simple white dress, dirt-smudged, hair tangled. Her face was pale, eyes hollow. She began to step toward me, slow and deliberate. "Who are you?" I called, voice cracking. She didn't respond, only tilted her head and smiled. Her teeth were stained black, lips cracked. I stumbled backward. My flashlight beam danced over new bones, lower legs, a femur. The woman reached out with a hand as thin as a deer's leg. "Help us," she whispered, voice like dry leaves scratching. "We are lost, but not forgotten." My heart pounded. I backed toward the path, but the trees shifted, blocking my way. The circle of oak saplings seemed to close in, branches twisting like skeletal fingers. The woman drifted across the ground as if gliding. She knelt beside a fresh mound of earth, soil freshly disturbed, no grass yet. Her hand pressed into it and rose empty, soil falling from her palm. Behind her, more figures emerged. 2 young children, a man in tattered overalls, all pale and drifting, their eyes fixed on me. I realized with horror they were all dead these 70 years, exhumed and dumped back into the earth. They stood in a ring around the dead sapling. Each one's wrist bore a crude tattoo, a number: 405, 406, 407. The same as the order they were exhumed. Panicking, I turned and ran back down the ridge, hands clawing at brush, chest aching. Their whispers followed me. "Remember, free us." When I burst into my grandfather's cornfield, the voices stopped. The orchard stood silent, as if nothing had happened. I spent the night poring over old property records and newspaper clippings. In 1935, the highway contractors had unearthed exactly 6 bodies where the orchard stands now. They hastily reburied them, but the tree planting had failed. Only one survived, the rest succumbed to blight. Legend said the bones fed the soil, and no tree could flourish on their restless earth. That night, I dreamed of the woman in white pressing a skull into my hands. I awoke with her teeth imprinted on my cheek, cold pain that lingered. The following day, I returned with a metal detector and trowel. I carefully dug up the remains, finding the 6 graves exactly where the saplings surrounded the dead tree. I gathered the bones into canvas bags, intending to rebury them with dignity at the town cemetery. As twilight fell, I lugged the bags down the ridge. By the old headstones in the Peterson family plot, I dug a shallow grave. As I poured the first bag of bones into the earth, a rush of wind scattered my hair. I gasped. The woman in white stood at the edge of the cemetery, watching. When I finished reburying the last bone, I looked up. She was closer now, hovering just beyond the wrought iron gate. I spoke into the dark, though my voice trembled. "You're free. Rest now." The woman's hollow eyes glowed with moonlight. She extended a skeletal hand, then lowered it. Slowly, she drifted backward, fading into a silver glow. The ground under the orchard trembled as though the earth itself breathed its last, and the saplings wilted, leaves turning brittle. Now, every time I walk past the ridge, the orchard lies flat, trees dead, soil barren. I grow old thinking of those souls, finally at peace. But sometimes at dusk, I hear soft footsteps in the cornfield and a whisper, "Thank you." And for a moment, I almost see her silhouette among the stalks, pale dress drifting as if in blessing, reminding me that memory is what frees the dead. They called him Emmett Graves, recluse and craftsman, living in a decrepit cabin at the edge of Ravenswood Hollow. As a child, I heard tales of his dolls, life-sized, carved from local maple, eyes inlaid with shards of obsidian so lifelike they seemed to blink. Some said he used real children's teeth and strands of hair, though that was as much rumor as truth. Others claimed if you stared into those dolls' eyes long enough, you'd see scenes of bodies buried in the hollow, or glimpse the doll-maker's face twisted in anguish. My name is Bethany Caldwell, 29, graduate student researching Appalachian folklore. When I arrived in Ravenswood for fieldwork, locals steer me away. "Graves is ill," they'd whisper. aimless after Miss Lorraine died. Lorraine Thorne was Emmett's niece, vanished without a trace 8 years ago. His cabin sat less than a mile from mine. I could see smoke curling from his chimney at dawn. On a drizzling October evening, I decided to pay him a visit under pretext of studying local crafts. I hiked the muddy path through red oaks and thorny briars. As I neared the cabin, I saw dolls hanging from every branch of a dead elm, their porcelain faces chipped, limbs akimbo as though they'd been impaled mid-dance. Their glass eyes reflected the weak light of my lantern. My stomach clenched, but I pressed on. The cabin door creaked open before I could knock. Inside, it was littered with wood shavings, doll heads, and half-finished limbs. Emmett sat hunched over a workbench under a single flickering bulb. His eyes, sunken black, fixed on a doll head he was painting with the care of a surgeon. "Can I help you?" His voice was like creaking floorboards, hollow aging. I swallowed. "Mr. Graves, I'm Bethany Caldwell, researching regional artisans. I was hoping to speak with you about your craft." He set down the paintbrush. "No one visits me except the wind." He stood, revealing a scar from his temple to his chin, pale and puckered. "Why you here?" "I want to understand your dolls. Are they inspired by local children?" I asked, heart pounding. He studied me. "I make what I see." Without another word, he turned and began carving. I watched the wood curls fall as he worked an unmarked maple block into a child's torso. Once the shape emerged, he began inlaying obsidian in the eye sockets. Gasped. He paused, meeting my eyes. "You see, these dolls, they're vessels." He ran a gnarled finger over the doll's neck, where a delicate locket was embedded. "Trapped souls. Moments in time." He tapped the side of my head. "You think you're not haunted, but you are. Every whisper in the night's here. Every shadow flicker in your room, they're here." A sudden chill rippled through me. I glanced at a grimy window. 3 dolls lined up on the sill, faces turned outward, watching. Something about their gaze felt accusatory. Emmett's rasping breath filled the silence. "Your niece, Lorraine," I stammered. "She was your niece?" He paused his carving. "Sweet girl. Born in 89. Died 17. His hands trembled as he carved. "Fell into Ravenswood Creek, or so they said. But I saw her in the hollow after. I saw her eyes. They begged me for help. I stepped closer. You believe she survived." Emmett wiped sweat from his forehead. "I had to keep her here. Keep her safe." He gestured around. "That's why I started making dolls. To house the lost." He lifted the half-finished child torso. "But they don't stay put. They get restless." From the window, a sudden crash echoed. I spun. A doll had fallen from the sill. Its neck snapped. Black, jelly-like fluid seeped from the fracture. Emmett let out a strangled cry. The doll's body twitched, limbs contorting. Its eyes, obsidian orbs, rolled upward, revealing an empty, cavernous socket. Then it stopped. I yanked at Emmett's sleeve. "We need to leave." I grabbed my bag and fled the cabin. Behind me, I heard him scream, a wordless wail that echoed in the hollow. Rain spattered my face as I stumbled toward the path. When I glanced back, I saw him at the door, holding Lorraine's doll, its eyes missing, head tilted. He raised it toward the sky, mouth moving, though I heard no words. The storm swallowed him. I didn't return to Ravenswood Hollow after that night. But the image of those dolls, rows of them hung from trees, each face a silent scream, haunts me. Months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a small wooden box. I opened it. Tiny doll's torso, maplewood polished smooth, eyes of obsidian. A note inside read, "The Hollow remembers." I tossed the doll into my fireplace. As the flames consumed it, I heard a girl's laughter, bright echoing. I covered my ears, but it only grew louder. Then silence. Now, each time I walk through the woods, I feel eyes on my back. I hear the soft patter of doll feet behind me. And sometimes, when the wind rustles dead leaves, I swear I hear Lorraine's voice. "Help me, Aunt Bethany." I worked as a volunteer at Camp Driftwood, a youth center deep in Peters Hollow. Locals only ever called it Black Hollow. Its reputation. A cursed valley where lanterns of the lost drifted between trees at dusk, guiding unsuspecting travelers to watery graves. As a college sophomore, I volunteered for the team build week, unaware of the Hollow's grim reputation. My name is Darren Cole. On our final evening, after collecting firewood, I set off for the outhouse alone. The forest was quiet, too quiet. The sun dipped behind a ridge, and a thick fog rose from the creek. As I closed the latrine door, I noticed a faint glow between the trees, a single lantern bobbing a few feet off the ground. Its light was yellow, flickering like a dying firefly. I froze. The ranger had warned us, never follow a light that floats at ground level. But curiosity gnawed at me. I stepped into the mist. The lantern drifted deeper into the forest. It swayed as if beckoning. I hesitated, then followed, fog curling around my calves. Each step, the lantern retreated. Soon, all I could see was the glow. The forest was alive with whispered sighs. Branches brushed like skeletal fingers against my jacket. My heart pounded. Still, the lantern glowed, suspended before me on a crooked branch. Its light revealed a path leading to the creek's bank, where the water was black as ink. At the edge, the lantern hovered over a sunken log, moss-cushioned and slick. The light illuminated something half-buried, a shovel. I felt bile rise in my throat. The lantern drifted onto the creek, moving as if floating on the surface. I squinted. In the water's reflection, I saw a pale face, sharp cheekbones, eyes sunken, lips parted in a silent scream. Then the face vanished. I stumbled backward as the lantern sank beneath the surface. The creek erupted in a swirl of mist. Under the water, I saw a pair of legs tangled in reeds, boots caked in mud. Something dark writhed beneath them, something alive or nearly. I wanted to run, but my feet stayed rooted. From the fog emerged a figure dressed in tattered coveralls, chest dripping with mud. His face was twisted, part drowned, part discolored by water, hair matted. His once white t-shirt clung to his gaunt frame. He didn't speak, his mouth open, closing like a fish's. He tilted his head, eyes fixed on me. Then, as if in slow motion, he raised an arm, limp pale. The lantern appeared in his hand, flame guttering. I turned and ran, splashing through the mud. I heard him behind me, squelching footsteps as he waded through the creek toward me. I burst out of the tree lean, heart pounding so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Campfires crackled. Laughter floated from cabins. I didn't stop until the lights of the mess hall were in sight. I stuttered to the counselor, Jared, too shaken to speak. He grabbed a flashlight and led a rescue party back to the creek. By the time we arrived, the lantern was gone, and only the sunken log remained. They found no body in the creek. No boots, no coveralls, nothing but murky water. Jared shook his head. "Could have been an old trapper's lantern," he said. But I knew what I'd seen, a drowned man dragging his lantern in the current, hoping to lure me. That night I couldn't sleep. The mental image of that drowned face pursued me. I remembered legends of Black Hollow, settlers who drowned during a flash flood, their corpses lost in the mire. Lanterns they once carried would appear to draw others into their fate. Each October, campers reported strange lights, hoping for cool campfire stories. But those who followed seldom returned. I left Camp Driftwood the next morning, bag packed before dawn. On my way out, I passed the creek. The fog hovered over the water like smoke. I smelled wet earth and something rotting. Then a lantern bobbed in the distance, dripping water. My stomach dropped. I scrambled back into my car, watching the lantern as it floated toward shore. As the sun climbed, the lantern dimmed and winked out. I didn't look back. Weeks later, in Knoxville, I heard the last camper died, found unconscious on the creek bank, frothing at the mouth, eyes glazed. They said she saw something walk through the water toward her, something dragging a lantern. They tried to record her testimony, but her voice was gone, just a series of gurgles. I still dream of that lantern, flickering through the fog. And when autumn winds howl, I can almost feel a pale arm brush my shoulder, offering a lantern's flame. I never speak of Black Hollow again. But if you ever wander through Appalachia at dusk, listen for the faint clink of metal. See if a yellow glow drifts just out of reach. Because if you follow it, you might never come back, and the drowned will add your bones to the black water. They say the screech owl is the reaper of Appalachian woods, a harbinger of death. My grandmother, Nana Elsie, always warned me, if you hear one screech at midnight, count yourself lucky. 3 screeches, you're marked. I was skeptical until last October when I visited her cabin on Iron Mountain alone after college graduation. I was 21, eager to prove I was beyond childish superstitions. The cabin sat on stilts over a deep ravine, surrounded by tulip trees and hemlocks. It had been in the family for generations. Nana built it wood by wood after my granddad died in a logging accident. When I arrived, her rocking chair sat empty on the porch, a question mark. I called her name, no answer. Inside, the place was untouched, as if she just stepped out. I found her journal on the table. The last entry, dated 2 nights prior, read, "He's coming, screecher in the darkness. I see him, eyes burn. I fear he's come for me. Apprehension ripple through me." I called the local sheriff, no response. By mid-afternoon, worried and alone, I explored the ravine's edge. The trees clutched at the sky. Moss clung to bark like ancient mold. At dusk, the forest hummed with cicadas. Then a distant screech, the sound so raw it made my skin prickle. I looked up. The canopy was empty. The screech cut off abruptly. I strained to hear more, but the woods grew still. That night, I lay in bed with a shotgun in my lap. At midnight, I heard it again, 3 screeches, one after another. My breath caught. I gripped the shotgun, sliding out of bed. The moon was a sliver, pale light filtering through the window. I crept to the porch, shotgun trained at the trees. The screecher perched on a branch, but it wasn't an owl. Its body was gaunt, limbs unnaturally long, feathers matted, part bird, part man. Its eyes glowed with a feral hunger. It tilted its head, staring at me. Then it spread its wings, spanned nearly 7 feet, and dove toward me. I fired. The blast echoed through the ravine. The screecher shrieked, crashing into the undergrowth. I ran stumbling down the steps. Rain began to fall, slow at first, then heavier like the sky weeping. By the time I reached the bottom, I heard crawling in the underbrush behind me. I dared a glance. The screecher limbs bent at impossible angles, skittering across the forest floor like a nightmare. I sprinted to my car, slamming the door and slamming my foot on the gas. Headlights flashed through the downpour. As I sped down the winding mountain road, the screecher appeared on the hood, scratched to the windshield, claws digging into the metal. I swerved, fishtailing across the yellow line. It tumbled off, landing in the forest. I didn't stop to see if it got up. Back in Knoxville, I told the sheriff my story. He nodded solemnly. "You saw a screecher," he said. "Legend says they're lumberjacks who died in a collapse, their souls twisted into monsters." He advised me never to return. I agreed, rattled to the core. Weeks later, I visited Nana Elsie's grave in the local cemetery. As I turned to leave, I heard it, a single screech, high and keening. I froze. Then, from the shadows between two headstones, I saw a gaunt shape, tattered skin stretched over bone, wings folded like a bat's, head cocked. Its eyes glowed with recognition. It raised a wing, exposing sharp talons. I ran, white-knuckled, tears sliding down my cheeks. I didn't stop until I reached my car, doors locked, engine roaring. As I sped away, I glimpsed it perched on the cemetery fence, watching. Its screaming cry echoed, following me down the highway, carrying its promise, "I remember you." When I wove through Dead Man's Pass on my way home from work, I always passed a bent-over hitchhiker. He stood at the entrance to a gravel sidetrack, thumb raised, black hair obscuring his face. I suspected he was a local vagrant, begging for a ride to nowhere. "My name is Ross Camden, paramedic." On November 2nd, I finished a grueling 12-hour shift and hit the winding road home. At 10:43 p.m., I saw him again, his hand trembling at his side, panting, eyes glowing. Against my better judgment, I stopped. The hitchhiker climbed into the passenger seat, shirt caked in mud, boots soaked. I turned onto the sidetrack. He kept staring straight ahead, shoulders hunched. When I tried conversation, he didn't respond. "I need to get to town," he finally said, voice hollow. "Taking this road. This road leads to Dead Man's Pass," I said, flicking on the dome light. "Ain't no town out there." He sighed. "I know." I slowed as we entered the pass. The road narrowed between towering cliffs. Ancient trees arched overhead, their limbs like twisted arms. Moonlight spilled onto the pavement, illuminating a small shack jutting from the cliffs, an old roadside cabin. I recognized it, the site of a deadly accident 10 years ago, where a school bus full of kids plunged off a guardrail. All 33 on board died instantly. Some said their souls lingered, trapped in the pass. At the shack, the hitchhiker pointed. "Drop me off there." I stopped in the gravel. He opened the door. I expected him to slip into the night. Instead, he stumbled in and collapsed by the door. I parked at the edge of the pass and radioed my partner, but the radio crackled and died. When I turned to check on him, the saddlebag by his feet had shifted. The hitchhiker was gone, vanished into the darkness. I jumped out. My flashlight beam pierced the pitch black, reflecting off the cabin's broken window. Inside, the hitchhiker lay sprawled on the floor, arms outstretched, eyes glassy. I knelt beside him, pulse faint but present. "Hang on, pal." I radioed again. Still nothing. I felt around his coat for identification. Found none. On his back, I noticed a crooked scratch, a 3-fingered mark. Shaking, I called for an ambulance on my cell. There was no signal. I dragged him to the front steps. He groaned. "They're trapped in the mirror," he rasped. "Release them or join them." His eyes rolled back, and he went still. I leaned over, heart racing. "Hang in there." I examined the cabin door. Splintered wood, nails twisted. I opened it and stepped inside. The interior was lit by moonlight streaming through holes in the roof. Dust motes drifted in the air. At the far end, a cracked full-length mirror leaned against the wall. Its glass rippled like water. As I approached, I saw faces pressed against its surface, children in tattered uniforms, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams. Their hands slid along the inside of the glass, as if begging me to let them out. A cold gust slammed the door shut behind me. I spun. The hitchhiker stood in the corner, his coat flapping like wings. His eyes glowed phosphorescent. Slowly he approached, stepping over broken toys and rotting floorboards. The children in the mirror thrashed, banging on the glass. A loud crack split the air as one of the mirror's edges splintered. I backed away. "What do you want?" My voice wavered. The hitchhiker ran his fingers over his chest. "I was driver. My fault. Barrel split." He pointed at himself. "Dead. Now a guide." He then pointed to the mirror. "They're in there." I glanced. The glass rippled again, faces contorting in agony. Hands reached through the cracks, grasping air. I shivered. "How do I free them?" He extended his hand. "Break it." His eyes were sorrowful, pleading. I backed against the wall, tears stinging my eyes. I picked up a wooden beam from the floor and hefted it. The children's faces in the mirror blurred, tears of glass streaming down their cheeks. I swung the beam, striking the glass. Shards sprayed outward, cutting my arm. The mirror shattered with a final scream like crack. Light burst into the room, and suddenly I felt weight lift off my chest. Outside, I heard a chorus of whispering voices, soft, grateful, "Thank you." I turned to the hitchhiker. His form flickered like a dying candle. He smiled faintly. "Rest now," he whispered and vanished. Blood dripped from my arm as I exited the cabin. The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance. I'd finally gotten a signal. The children were gone. Only shards of the mirror remained. I peeled back my shirt and pressed it to my arm, wrapping the wound in place. As I limped down Dead Man's Pass, moonlight glinted off the broken glass on the ground. I thought I heard faint giggles, carried on the wind. Weeks later, at the coroner's office, I identified the hitchhiker's body. Arcane records list him as the bus driver who died 10 years ago, not found until now. His name, Walter Whitman, age 32. They said no one had ever found his body after the crash. Whatever died in that cabin, it wasn't Walter's soul alone. The children had lingered, trapped in reflective glass until I shattered it. Now each time I drive through Dead Man's Pass, I replay their faces in my mind, silent pleas behind fractured glass. And when I pass that old cabin, I feel a cold nudge on my elbow, like someone tapping me to remember. Because sometimes the dead leave reminders, broken glass on gravel roads, faint echoes of children's laughter, and the knowledge that some mirrors are better left unbroken. Nobody climbed Widow's Peak, not after dark. The mountain jutted above the tiny town of Ashford, its jagged silhouette like a widow's bent back against the sky. Legend said a woman named Grace Mallard had lived there in solitude after her family died in a smallpox outbreak in 1882. She carved nooses for local families, and after she died by her own rope, her spirit cursed the peak. Anyone who reached the summit at midnight would hang themselves at dawn. My name is Lydia Moore, a journalist chasing a story about Appalachian legends. I scoffed at the news tale until a radio host called him the Midnight Climber, some fool who summited on Halloween and was found dangling from a sycamore 2 days later. Police ruled it suicide, but locals refused to go near the mountain after dark. I saw the internet posts, blurry photos of a ghastly woman-shaped fog drifting around the peak, her mouth open in a silent scream. On November 1st, at 10 p.m., I drove my Jeep up the winding road that snaked around Widow's Peak. The air was stiff with November chill. Leaves scraped the windshield. My breath fogged the windows. At the trailhead, I strapped on my pack and set off under a sliver of moon. The path was steep, slick with rotting leaves. As I climbed, the forest grew silent. No rustle of critters, no whisper of wind. At 11:47 p.m., I reached a clearing with a crude stone marker. Grace Mallard, 1825 to 1882. Beneath it, a small pile of withered flowers. I placed my recorder at the base, hoping to capture any EVP. Then I started toward the summit. The path narrowed to a ridgeline with sheer drops on either side. I pressed on, breath ragged, heart pounding. At midnight exactly, I reached the peak. The summit was barren, just a circle of flagstones surrounded by fallen branches. I felt a sudden breeze swirl around me. Then I heard it, the faint scrape of leather on stone. I froze. Turning, I saw her ghostly form in tattered gray, face veiled by wisps of fog. She hovered near the edge of the cliff, head tilting as though searching. Long, tangled hair drifted around her. I raised my camera, lens trembling. "Grace Mallard," I whispered. Her mouth opened in a wordless howl. The noise rolled down a mountain, rattling leaves like a storm before wind. Then she drifted toward me, footsteps silent. My skin crawled. "I'm a journalist," I stammered. "I want to tell your story." Her hand, skeletal and blotched, pointed to the cleft of the peak, where dozens of nooses once hung. I followed her gaze. Rope skeletons swayed in a half-ghost, half-physical reality. Each noose twitched as though weighted by an unseen occupant. My stomach churned. The cords looked frayed, rotten, but each seemed capable of bearing weight. She raised her other hand, beckoning. "Remember," her voice a brittle hiss. "Remember or share my fate." The ropes jolted as though tugged. My knees buckled. I struggled for breath. Despite the darkness, I saw my own shadow stretching across the peak, elongated and distorted. She glided toward me, hand outstretched. I bolted down the path, adrenaline propelling me. The air echoed with her scream, a siren song of rage and anguish. Branches whipped my face. Rocks tumbled underfoot. I tripped, sliding 50 feet down the slope before skidding to a halt in brambles. I scrambled up, chest heaving, and ran until I burst from the tree line into the road. I collapsed against my Jeep, hands shaking, chest burning. A few hours later, as dawn broke, I woke in a passenger seat. My recorder lay, sputtering on the floor. Heart hammering, I grabbed it and hit playback. At 11:59 p.m., I heard breathing, my own. Then, at midnight, they came for me, a voice cracked. "I will not forget." Then a sudden whisper, "Nor will they." The recorder cut out. 2 days later, I found an old article in the Ashford Gazette dated October 31st, 1882, about Grace's execution, an accidental hanging during a vigil, not suicide. She tried to save her nephew from the noose, but got caught herself. The townspeople buried her body at the peak. No one marked her grave except that stone marker. On November 4th, my phone rang at 6 a.m. I answered on the second ring. At the other end was silence, only ragged breathing. Then, "Do you remember?" I froze. The line went dead. I sat in my Jeep, trembling, staring at the mountain. The sun rose behind the peaks, painting the treetops gold. I should have felt relief, but I felt eyes on my back. I turned and saw her standing at the road's edge, Grace Mallard, tattered gray dress glinting in sunlight, a noose around her neck, though no rope reached the sky. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. I slammed the door, peeling away. As I rounded the curve, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She stood still on the shoulder, head tilted, lips moving. When I dared look again, she was gone. The road stretched empty. Now each night I record my dreams, half-remembered fragments of twisted rope and a ghostly hand reaching. When I wake, I check my frame. Sometimes there's a pale smear on my neck, a bruise. A whisper of a rope? I don't know. But I remember her warning, or share my fate. I should have known better than to chase the legend of the hellhound of Red Chimney Ridge. My name is Sam Fletcher, wildlife biologist specializing in Appalachian fauna. I'd heard the rumors, a massive black dog with eyes of burning coals, prowling the ridge where the old McAllister homestead burned down in 1924. Townsfolk said anyone who saw its eyes was marked for death in 3 nights. I arrived in Gatlinburg on a cold November morning, backpack loaded with camera traps, audio recorders, and enough supplies for a week. I hired a local guide, Pete Lawson, a retired national park ranger with silver hair and a leathery face. He'd heard my plan and gave me a sad nod. "Ain't natural," he said. "You sure you want to mess with it?" I smirked. Scientific curiosity overrode any superstition. He only sighed. By dusk, we reached the foot of Red Chimney Ridge. The forest was a cathedral of oak and hemlock. Lichen dripped from branches. The undergrowth was a tangle of laurel and ferns. We set up camera traps along a game trail and playback devices with recordings of coyote howls, hoping to lure any large predators. Pete hesitated at a fallen log. "These woods turned dark after the fire," he said. "They say the hound was the devil's pet, unleashed to guard the site." I laughed. "Nonsense." He spat into the leaves. "We'll see." After Pete returned to town, I climbed higher up the ridge, reaching the charred remains of the McAllister homestead. Only 2 red chimneys stood, bricks blackened. Smoke drifted from the ground like a curse. I set up camp nearby, sleeping bag over my shoulders. At around midnight, I woke to a low, mournful howl echoing through the trees. I slipped outside my tent, breath steaming, and scanned the darkness. The howl repeated, closer now, reverberating off the ridge. I raised my camera to capture night vision footage. Through the lens came a flash of coal-orange eyes reflecting the moon, only 50 yards away. My heart froze. A massive hound, muscles rippled beneath fur like moving shadow, crouched behind a fallen oak. Its eyes burned, its fangs glinted. I whispered into my recorder. "Hound sighted just below the ridge. A huge, fur-like ash. Eyes burning." My voice trembled. The hound's lips curled in a snarl. Smoke curled from its nostrils. Without warning, it lunged, bounding over the log in a blur. I backed away, stumbling, and tripped over a root. The hound crashed onto me, pinning my chest under its weight. Its jaws opened, jaws lined with teeth black as coal. I slapped at its snout, heart hammering. It stank of sulfur and old decay. Its eyes bored into mine as it snarled. Then it withdrew, melting into the darkness. I scrambled to my feet, gasping for air. The recorder's light blinked. I hissed at it, but I couldn't take my eyes off the ridge. The hound's howl rose again, closer this time, like a promise of death. I retreated to my camp and packed in shaking hands. My headlamp illuminated moving shapes at the edge of the forest, hundreds of coal-orange eyes peering at me. I staggered toward my backpack, nearly tripping. I grabbed my rifle and shambled toward the tent where my camera traps lay. I loaded around with sweaty fingers. My foot caught on a stump. I tumbled, rifle clattering. A roar like 1,000 hounds consumed the ridge. Trees shook. Ash fell like rain. The hound burst from the undergrowth, huge as a bear. Its jaws flexed, snapping in rage. I fired a shot into its shoulder. It yelped, a sound like metal grinding, then charged again. I fired again, heart pounding, but the bullets seemed to have no effect. The hound's chest heaved, smoke curling from its wounds, its fur clumped with black blood. It leapt. I braced, closing my eyes, waiting for fangs. But instead, a figure loomed behind it, a man in a tattered overcoat, face ashen, eyes dead. It was Silas McAllister, the boy who'd tended the family's hounds when the fire struck. He pointed, a ghostly finger trembling. The hound paused. Silas opened his mouth in a bony howl that matched the hound's. The beast rose on its hind legs, towering. Its head swiveled, eyes fixed on me. I realized with a shock. The 3 howls, father, mother, and sister, who died in the fire. They materialized in swirling ash around the ridge. Their eyes burned. Silas raised his hand, and the hound lunged off the ridge into the darkness. I scrambled to my feet, staggering downward, hands clutching at roots. The forest seemed alive, branches grasping at me. I tumbled down the slope, sliding on leaves, half blinded by tears. When I reached the base, I didn't stop until Pete's truck was in sight. Panting, I slammed into the passenger seat. Pete spun around. Son of a, what happened? I gasped. It's real. The hound, it's real. He nodded, as though expecting it. You saw its master. I sank into the seat, rifle clutched in my lap, eyes wide. Pete stared at the mountains in silence. I never returned to Red Chimney Ridge. My footage captured nothing but pitch-black forest, punctuated by 2 flares of orange light. I never fully processed what I saw. But I know this. Some legends are rooted in truth, born of tragedy and bound by blood. And at Red Chimney Ridge, the fire never died. It merely waits, breathing ash into darkness,